This is excellent. Welcome to the Spring Office Hours podcast. My name is DaShaun Carter. Thank you for joining. Today, we are going to talk about scaling to zero with Spring. But first, let's go around the room. Let's see what's happening. Dan is in flight. He's on his way here to Kansas City to hang out with me. I'm super excited for that. I'm going to do a quick audio check. How's my audio doing? Can everybody hear me okay? I want to make sure. I've had some audio problems in the past. I want to make sure that I'm giving you the high quality audio. And I'd also like to bring in my good friend, my longtime friend, the reason for the season. He's why I'm here. My good friend, Josh. Josh, backstage. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Hello. Good morning.
Hey,
Hi.
I can't hear Josh. Oh, let me fix it. Can I hear you now, Josh?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
There, I can hear you. Can everybody hear me and Josh? And Glenn is here. Glenn is here. He gave me the thumbs up. We've got
to get him on the show.
Glenn has been on the show.
I mean, right now, just bring him. He's the good.
I will send him the invite. I will send him the invite because the more the merrier, especially for today. Glenn, if you have your Slack open, I am going to send you the invite because this is fun. Yeah, and it's a great time to be a Spring developer. So I'm going to go ahead and send Glenn
in the morning.
So why don't you explain that? 6:30 in the morning, because the reason that we're starting later than normal today is because, Josh, where are you?
Sydney. It's where they keep the kangaroos. And it's good to be here with y'all.
And what time is it there?
6:36, which is
6:30 in the morning. I appreciate it.
But only because I am I'm sorry I was not able to join earlier. But I'm also I have a flight to Melbourne today, so I'm going to go to Melbourne, do some stuff, and then come right back same day. And,
oh wow!
It's going to be one of those days.
It's going to be you kind of, it seems from my perspective, you kind of go in spurts. Like, hey, if you're going to leave the country, you're going to leave the country. You go and you travel and you do things, and then you kind of take a break. Maybe get to hang out for a little bit, and that's awesome. And then you kind of do the deep dives, and we always get the great videos and the great demos. And then you kind of hit the road again.
Yeah, sort of the thing, isn't it? Yeah,
it started slow, but it seems to be picking up real fast. I got a question.
Yeah.
Are you going to be at Spring One?
Me? I mean, if they invite me, if they let me, probably going to be there. Yeah.
I mean, it's right around the corner. I think it's going to be good.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be good this year.
Maybe they'll let me in. Who knows?
Just joined. Glenn.
Oh, there's trouble. There's trouble.
Look at this. We have the crew.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks so much for joining.
Talk about last minute kind of invite. I just said hi.
Well, here's one reason. One reason, because I like the energy that you two provide. I get energized when you're both around, and when I get to even just be a fly on the wall of those conversations. You guys have great energy together. So I figured the more the merrier.
Josh, I have to let you know I'm a little jealous of DaShaun right now, just from the heart.
Why?
Because barbecue.
The barbecue, yes, yeah. Dan is on his way. He's making the trip so that we can have the barbecue. Yeah. And
wait, he's on his way to your place?
KCDC is happening this week.
Oh,
okay. So we're gonna do a lot of barbecue. As much barbecue as possible.
Burn ends all the way.
Burn ends is definitely on the agenda for this week. So this is great. So I'll shout out. We have a few folks that have been around. Simon actually has been here. He kind of shared, let everybody know he's been in the chat for over an hour, just kind of waiting, letting everybody know, hey, we're going to be a little bit late today. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have some regulars. Thomas is here saying hello. He's at JCon today.
I know. I keep seeing all my friends there. I'm like, I'm missing out. Cologne, I wish they were there, but
awesome T-shirts that he's going to be parading around JCon, around his Spring View component that is server-side rendering for Spring and with Timeleaf in the back end, which is pretty cool. And he's asking about Eclipse Store. Have you guys heard of Eclipse Store?
Yeah, it's basically persistent collections, right? Like that's cool stuff.
Yeah. Yep. We got folks from all over saying hello. So I just want to say that. Thanks you for the audio check, and we can hear things. So this could be dangerous.
Just saying, it can happen.
It can happen.
Right.
Glenn, where are you at?
Well, right now I'm actually setting up for Atlanta Java Users Group tonight. So
What's the topic?
On?
Oh, it's gonna be awesome tonight.
What's the topic?
It is tonight. It's actually Valerie Regas is giving a talk on the product doesn't develop itself, developer self-care to avoid burnout.
That's a good one.
Ooh.
That's a high quality one.
Yes.
Is that going to be recorded? I might want to share that with my good friend Josh. Just want to make sure that Josh and you, like I've seen all the spring releases that are coming out, and let's take a look at what's happening. So one of the things we like to do is just remind everybody about the spring releases. We take a look at the spring calendar. So I'm going to.
Oh my gosh, let's go there. What
calendar? That's spring that I own.
Calendar.
Wow.
Yeah, let's see if we can do this. I'm gonna switchy. Oh, that didn't work.
I'm already in the playground. I'm already playing with 3.2 in the snapshots. It is fun.
That's amazing. So
Loom, crack,
today,
awesome.
there's lots of stuff. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Loom support. We're going to talk about crack today because we're going to talk about scale to zero. But one of the things that we're trying to do here in office hours is just keep everybody aware. One of our other friends, Oliver, today, I saw a little comment from him. The idea of it doesn't matter what it is, software. If you aren't upgrading software, there will be a CVE at some point. So the idea of staying on the latest and greatest it's an important one, no matter what you're dealing with. It doesn't matter if it's COBOL and it hasn't been touched since 1980 and still. Eventually, there will be a CVE. And one of the practices that we want to deliver is staying on the latest and greatest.
It's such an unreasonable posture to want to stay in an old version forever. I don't know how people. How do you? The idea that you're going to write software is just going to stay where it is forever. Just who taught somebody this idea? It's not a. We have reproducible builds. That's not the same thing as like viable. Like.
It's like this. I love retro things, but there's a point where retro's not good. Like things in the refrigerator, retro bad. Okay.
Eventually, bugs will be found.
Yes, bugs, CVEs, like you said.
Yeah.
And when somebody asks a question, and like on a support question, I'm like, what's first question I ask is, what version you're on, so I know. Okay, where do I test? Is it like previous version that's still supported? Current version, whatever. And then you see the one from like 2 or 3 years ago, and you're like, oh man, that one's no longer supported, and that's Java 8, and that hurts.
So funny thing is when I'm talking to customers, if customers have upgraded to Java 11, typically they're already upgrading to Java 17. So
yes,
of the orgs that I'm dealing with and seeing, there are more on Java 8 trying to get to Java 17 than there are on Java 11 trying to get to Java 17. Because once you've practiced it, once that's been a part of your posture, a part of your culture of adopting the newer, better, then it's easy. And I think that goes back into just the software development. We don't expect things to be able to run forever. That's not a good posture. A better posture is like, hey, when there's new releases like here on the calendar, it's a good practice to take the new releases. I like to say if my tests pass, take it to production, right? If you have tests that are passing, why not take it to production? Are you going to hit one of the edge cases from the snapshot or whatever? I've seen Josh do snapshot demos hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times. And
never be afraid.
I'm not. So
yeah,
outside of these new releases that are coming. So what do we have this week? Spring Kafka, security, a bunch of security releases. Spring Vault, which came up on my stream yesterday. Spring Authorization Server, Spring Cloud Data Flow. Hello. And Spring for GraphQL, Spring Integration, Spring Session, a lot of new releases. And the thing is, these releases are coming out so fast that it feels like, at least for Spring Session, I think there's a release for Spring Session last month. I think I'm expecting a Spring Shell release, or did it already come out? There's a Spring Shell 3.0.1, but these releases are coming out fast. So sometimes we're talking about the same project getting released, and it feels like, oh, we just mentioned that a couple of weeks ago, because that's how fast things are moving. When things are found, that's what this greater spring team does. They get out new releases. one of the other topics that's come up is like, what does that mean for me if I don't have commercial support and I put in a bug? Well, I file issues and I try to, file patches, but I don't have commercial support. So my issue that gets submitted to a project doesn't get prioritized compared to somebody with commercial support. So that the limited team, they get to go in and fix the ones for the commercial support.
Right. And can you blame them?
I can't.
Given there's only a finite number of days in the year and things we can do.
Yeah.
It's natural. If I don't understand that idea either, like infinite extended support, open source, it's not a thing.
I
So
just
these
like
are
toys.
These are the
Like new
latest.
toys to play with. They're fun.
I
I mean,
have.
come on, let's lift it up for the toys you get with all these updates. I mean, really, it's like, I mean, what was it, the 3.1 release? Just being able to test, just it's like, okay, I'm going to run the app with test containers right here, right now. Let's just do it. Let's go. What does it look like? I don't have to do any setup. It's just there, and it's like, isn't that nice? I'm like, part of what I'm working with task now is like, all those old samples I have, they're going to go do that. It's like test container. Just start the test. Everything's running, and you got a free ephemeral world of happiness. Do you feel the happiness, everybody?
I feel
do.
that.
Do you feel the happiness?
Unending.
That's why I like doing what I do. And these releases, take them. If you're using any of these projects that are on the screen, all I'm saying is go grab the latest version, not just for taking it to production, but also to give feedback to the team. They need you to take the new version so that we can find things, find issues, find ways to make it better. And that's a good practice to be in.
Well, it's like, I think it was like the 3.1. Was it the 3.1 or is it 3.2? I think it's 3.1. It's like now test containers are in the BOM. You don't have to put version numbers anymore. I think it's, was that 3.1, Josh?
That sounds right. I mean, I haven't put version numbers.
I think it's 3.1. It's like you don't have to have.
I think you're right.
I think it is. So all those test numbers, the version numbers you always had to put in your test container.
Yep.
Don't do that anymore. Let Boot do that for you. Enjoy the happiness. Once again, feel it, enjoy it.
So one thing I learned recently, I didn't know that Spring Cloud Data Flow was a part of the VMware Spring Runtime. I just learned.
Yes.
And so I think that Spring Cloud Data Flow is a big enough, fun enough project that maybe we ought to revisit that on the show sometime. So no pressure.
No pressure.
I'm just saying.
No.
A thing or two. And I think it'd be fun. And now we got a new release, so I think it'd be fun to kind of revisit Spring Cloud Data Flow.
All right.
Awesome. That was easy. So that's
Did I say yes?
You did. You totally committed. Totally committed to it. So yeah, on the show, normally we like to go over the calendar. What else has been going on? Tell me some stories. What are some cool things in the Spring ecosystem that are tickling your fancy these days?
I was just playing with that. My friend Jackie, he released this, completely open, completely like separate, community driven, has nothing to do with us. Thing that works with ChatGPT, right? Nice little Spring Boot starter for that. And I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. So yeah, pretty good.
Have you checked out the experimental project, Spring CLI? Have you looked at that lately?
Yeah.
Our good friend Mark Pollock has incorporated some of the ChatGPT goodness in there. So you can say, hey, Spring CLI, give me a boot project with data JPA and web and time leaf.
Right.
And you'll get something. You'll get something. But the idea that this is kind of a new way, like the way that the CLI is changing. Dan Vega also did a example ChatGPT with Spring Shell of being able to ask, hey, help me with this project. Like there's some of these really cool, interesting things, and we're just scratching the surface. I saw that you've got a recent video on the Spring Boot ChatGPT on your channel.
That was. But that's already outdated. Like there's already new stuff. I'm sending pull requests. Things are getting better. Like you can watch the video, but just know it's going to get even easier. There's some cool stuff there. Like it functionally, it already does what you need to do. So you could try it out today. But where I'm trying to make it a little bit more code. I wanted to do native Gravium, like
Yes.
automatically. So I'm working on that. But yeah, basically, just this is a cool ecosystem.
It is.
I'm a fan. I am a fan. What else is out there that's kind of amazing?
Spring
We
CLI
mentioned
has me
Spring
excited.
CLI.
Yeah,
That's
one of the
dope.
topics that is important coming out of that, I'm going to do a workshop tomorrow, and we talk about how you're going to arrange your code, versus or by feature versus by layer. And now, right, that face you just made, that's the face that I make for a few reasons. This idea of being able to start in a monolith and separate things. The idea, even with this Spring CLI, one of the things that Mark has kind of introduced is imagine our spring projects. We kind of have a good understanding. We have these getting started guides from those.
Yep.
Well, with his CLI, you can basically go, hey, give me the getting started for Spring Web. And it'll put Spring Web into your project, the getting started guide, basically the done example of the getting started guide, and it's in its own module. And it's set up like a modulith so that you can add and remove Spring Data JPA, Spring Batch. You could add and remove these getting started examples easily. Yeah. And if you're set up like that, then it's kind of easy to do, or it's much easier conceptually to add and remove these blocks, these features from your application. So thinking forward and trying to envision this future for Spring developers that I want to be a part of, that capability, that is reason enough for me to make sure that I'm delivering my software in these feature buckets instead of by layer.
By layers, the worst is so, and because you just see this proliferation of like public types everywhere. And I just think, did we not learn anything about encapsulation? If everything's supposed to be public, then, maybe Java's not the language for you. There's a whole reason that by default things are not public. It just seems, you got to think that was not the intended default. And yet we seem to fix it to every single thing. Yeah. And that enables these disgusting like arrangements of code. Just try it, people. Just try and remove the word public from all your classes. See what breaks. That's your graph. The things that are broken, those are your graph. I
can say that it was Jakob's demos were the first time where it resonated. On here's how you should do things. And it was, I probably saw multiple examples of that, but yeah, he was definitely the first one that kind of pointed me in that direction. And I get it.
I feel all modulithy. Don't you all feel like a little modulithy with this?
I do all my demos live in one single code page, and people always ask me, how do you have multiple classes per file? I'm like, you can only have one public class. That doesn't mean you can't have more than one class. People don't know. They think you have to create a brand new file and create a new class. I get quite that.
And that's one of the cheat codes. That's one of the first cheat codes you told me, is just do it all in one go, and then you can see it. You can always go back and forth, and it was easy to navigate. It was easy for the demo, and it makes sense. And plus, you go faster. So your demo, in your head. Yeah, that's one of those shortcuts that it's great for getting out the door. Right, keep it in your head.
Yeah, for a small enough app, it's great for just being done. Like, it's only when you start to get like the real multiple domains, you start to think, okay, well, maybe another package would be okay.
Yeah, but that's when modulith kicks in, right? Let's enforce those rules. Let's architecturally say these are the rules that we're going to have for our domain, right? So here's a domain, here's the domain. We just here's our 4 domains. Here are the rules for each of those domains. Each of those domains is a package. And now, once we establish that at compile time or testing time, I should say, not you can go in and say, has somebody reached in and grabbed a public thing from this class that they shouldn't have access to, right? And then it leads you to the question, shouldn't that have been private in the first place? And it gives you that extra layer of good architectural resilience, so you can create a small monolith, a large monolith, but modularized, or in some cases even having a microservice that's the service is a bit heavy. Microservices doesn't mean small. It means it's a service. No. It might be large, and it may have 2 or 3 domains in it. Why not have a module? May have those modules there, and have Spring module help you to kind of build a very solid project. So that's always fun.
Sig asked the question, isn't it easier to maintain if you use different files for classes?
No. Why would it be? What? If for a small enough code base, it's okay. Imagine you're writing a letter to somebody, okay? And then imagine you had to write every single letter on every single paragraph, just each one with 3 or 4 sentences. You had to write each paragraph in a separate piece of paper, and you had to keep you wrote the first paragraph. Then, as you wrote the second paragraph, you have the new piece of paper on top of the first piece of paper. That's not easier to write. Nobody writes like that. That's ridiculous. You want to see your whole letter in one place.
I like that, man. That was a good example. Solitary.
Or imagine you're making food and you can only like prepare and make one ingredient at a time, and everything else has to be back in the fridge. What? No, get it all there. Start slicing and dicing.
Good question. And good answer, Solitary Turian. It depends.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. The Spring Monolith, I think one thing that a lot of people are still confused about, the ones that haven't tried it, is really, it's just kind of rules, right? Doesn't it just kind of enforce rules like, hey, we want our things defined this way, separate your features this way? It's really just a set of rules.
No, it's actually more
but also enforcement.
And it's enforcement.
Yeah.
You can declare how you want your rules, right? It has a good set of defaults. Then you can enforce those rules by tests. It also generates documentation of your modules, but then also has a communication. So it facilitates the ability that I can have like 2 modules, and instead of me going in and grabbing and making calls to this given, y'all do you see me reaching out to the virtual space here?
For those that are going to be listening later, he's reaching into the air.
Okay. So instead of me always having to grab and make calls into it, why not send it a message, right? Hey, could you do this for me? Why make and reach into that package or that module and make a call? I could send it a message. Go do this for me. Go do this for me. And so it has a message. Yeah, so it has a messaging framework with it as well, and which facilitates, again, a module is its own body that sticks to its domain. And it may send signals to others, but they don't have to have direct knowledge of my module. They just know that they got a message and they need to take action. So it's more than, what you think of, again, it's rule declaration, it's enforcement, documentation, and then finally that messaging, which is pretty awesome.
Yep.
Ollie, you just nailed it, boss. You nailed
it. Yeah. Surprise.
Thomas says, I'm excited about reading Oliver's book.
Ooh.
It's going to be good. It's going to be a good thing. So yeah, what else? Anything else top of mind these days before we begin? For anybody that's watching, if you've got questions, throw them in the chat.
Who in this room has been playing with Academy and writing stuff for Academy? I've been doing a little bit of that.
That's good. Yeah, I'm a fan.
Mahmood has been nailing it. So he's been working a lot on that, and I've been helping a little bit with that stuff. So I'm excited about the Academy.
Thomas.
I'm excited about the Maurice's recent blog on connection details. Did anybody read that?
Oh yeah.
There's this.
You want to put the link in the chat?
Oh, I can do that. Let me give me a second.
Yeah.
1 second. Basically, let me find the bug. Basically, Spring Boot 3.1. You may not realize this, but 3.1. I mean, you two realize this. I'm just talking to the audience here, friends. They imagine doing something, introducing a new feature in Spring Boot that touches basically every other feature, right? You would think that would get a lot more fanfare, but it happened in just 3.1. And basically, what they did is they introduced here it is. They introduced, ta-da, a little bit of indirection. So normally, you in the old world before 3.1, which is to say everything for the last 10 years, basically, you have properties. They get turned into configuration properties objects. Those configuration properties objects get injected into auto configuration, and then they create a new database or Kafka connection or this, that, and the rest. Okay, fine. And then in the new thing, they added a bit of indirection. So now you have different ways to create those connection factories, those databases, those data sources. So they've extracted that into something called the connection details. So now you have either test containers or Docker Compose or property files. All of those can be used to create a connection details for a data source. And then that is what's used to configure the auto configuration for your data source. So you pass in the connection details. But what that means is you could also now contribute another type of connection details, and then that would get fed into the auto config for config. Like you need a data source for your JDBC template. So you need a data source for all the stuff. So imagine you have a connection detail. That's what then feeds into the thing that creates the data source for you, right? Well, like one of the interesting possibilities here is there's all this passwordless stuff, right?
Yes.
Like passwordless APIs in Microsoft Azure and so on. Like it's just a natural fit. So imagine having or even just imagine a connection details that looks in HashiCorp Vault and knows how to find the credentials for a particular thing, and then news up a thing for you, or does password rotation, right? You don't want to have a Spring data source password because then you have to swap it out somehow. And we do all sorts of shenanigans to like rotate that, right? Imagine if you could just behind the scenes. Now you've got that little bit of abstraction cover to do that little switch,
Yep. And then it's a retry. Oh, hey, that didn't work. Maybe a retry. But you could have some system built in with those connection details.
Yes.
There's the blog. Also, Solitarian. The blog is the Spring Boot 3.1 connection details abstraction that you can find on spring.io's blog for those that are listening. Yeah. Solitarian asks a good question, and this question resonates. He says, this is an interesting topic. I've struggled to appreciate the messaging in Spring integration when I just needed to send a file to SFTP. What's wrong with old-fashioned interfaces? Now, the reason that this is a really timely topic is because we have Spring integration experts here. Also, it was fairly recently where Josh did a few videos around FTP on his stream. So I know, and the thing is, in that series that you did, Josh, you talked about making FTP a part of your Spring integration. So I know that there's videos out there that we can reference, but maybe you want to jump in and answer the question.
So I'm struggling. Okay, I've struggled to appreciate the messaging in Spring integration, etc. When I just needed to send it, what's wrong with old-fashioned interfaces? So what am I? So what do you mean? I don't understand. What is the question?
Yeah, I'm difficult. I'm having a little bit of a hard time myself, because the way I see it is that when you're dealing with Spring integration, we're talking about enterprise integration patterns, where we're saying this is how we can control flow between various parts of how data flows within an app or between applications. So in this case, are we talking about making a direct call to the FTP service versus sending a message to like a gateway or something? Or
in my head without knowing exactly what the problem is. So one of the things that I always offer up is like, hey, if we want to pair, I've paired with many. I think I maybe even have paired with Solitarian. I offer up like, hey, let's jump on. Let's look at some code. Let's look at it together. If you want to share a GitHub repo, you know how to get a hold of us. Twitter handles are all here. But yeah, the thing that jumps out in my head is the idea of using FTP as a part of my Spring integration workflows. Like I connected that as soon as I saw Josh's series. So I'm going to recommend that we find that, and I'll try to put those in the show notes. Alec has a good question. How come can you have multiple domains with a microservice? Isn't that an anti-pattern?
In this case, the way that I would see it is that I have seen where people have denormalized some microservices, where they have taken the domains and split it out, and it became too small, and it became a performance drag for them. So they aggregated a few of the domains into a common service, not like aggressively huge, large, but in that case, there were still rules that they needed to enforce. So the thing is that you can normalize it out to a certain degree, and it works, but then it's like, okay, I need to pull it back in because of this or this. And I've seen cases like that. Now, is that an anti-pattern? It depends.
I think he's also talking about it in the sense of the monolith, like where I can have multiple names. And the whole idea of the monolith approach is they don't have to be separate services at the beginning.
No,
right? One of the reasons why we do
great point
services is so that we can go faster, right? The three of us could work on the same project without impacting each other if they're separate But performance-wise and pattern-wise and taking it to production, it doesn't have to be that way.
They don't have to exist as separate services. They can all exist within the same monolith as a domain, right? Within there, where instead of using like HTTP or whatever or if you're using Spring Cloud Stream to communicate between them through a messaging framework, you can do that internally through the messaging framework provided by Modulus. So you're still getting the same thing. They're just all incorporated within the same app.
Right.
So
before
Modulus gives you
crazy. Yeah, go ahead.
Modulus gives you something like CQRS, right? Like you get events for notifications. You have repositories for queries. It's and CQRS is actually a pattern people envisioned. It works great in a distributed context, but it was originally envisioned just for like modular code bases, right?
And we all tried to do the modular code bases, but what typically happened was we didn't have those rules or the enforcement in place. So we said, well, I'll just do it this one time. I'll just implement one of those over there this one time, and it'll be fine. It's got public on it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how we got into problems.
And the next thing you know.
Yeah. So I remind everybody that I do like to use this as kind of a therapy session sometimes. Just kind of, let it go, talk about the pain. But then the best part about this is we get to talk about there's no more pain.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is what threw me about his question was I was thinking about microservices being distributed and all that. And I said, well, sometimes you pull them in, but I was like, and I was thinking in the back of my head, preloaded modules, because when you pull it as a module to get that same stuff, you just pull it into an aggregate service. But there's still domains just as modules versus services. And then when you said that, I was like, thank you, DaShaun, you nailed it. So,
Glenn, do you have a YouTube channel?
No, but I guess I know.
Yeah, Spring Source Dev.
Yeah. Oh, well, I have that. Yeah. I mean, we have that. I have several talks on it.
Yeah, and you've been here on the show a few times.
True. Yeah. Not a personal one, but I do it through Spring.
Okay. Stick says we use expensive CyberArk tools for secret management. Solitary Turning says, I just wanted to use the SFTP template to send a file to SFTP, but instead I was almost forced to use the rather complicated messaging framework in there. This is something that we could probably look at together.
You can use the SFTP template. It's just better if you go through the channel. That way you have architectural indirection. You have opportunities to switch things out later. I don't know. Doesn't seem like too big a leap.
Awesome. Thomas says many use cases at smaller customers don't need the complexity of microservices in Kubernetes. We should make the trade-offs analysis more often, and Modulith allows us to start with a monolith and then transition to microservices easier if we really need them at a later date. Yes.
What's the alternative to Kubernetes? Is that like the Cloud Run on Google Cloud? Or what's like the specific? What do people use besides Kubernetes? I mean, at some point, you're using something that's built in Kubernetes, right? Like
on VMs, right? This is you're asking a very, very like common question when I'm in conversations with customers. Like, where are your workloads running? Some of them are running on the native Java services, like Google's Cloud Run, for example, or
which is Kubernetes. That's Knative, right?
Yep. Or the Azure's Spring Apps for Enterprise.
Which is Kubernetes again.
Kubernetes under. Yeah. Back in the day, we had Elastic Beanstalk. I heard that recently.
Yeah.
Right, where it's still like, hey, here's my workload, and it'll scale automatically, and that's got really nice hooks for Spring. But Docker, right? People are still building their own Docker files. I'm sorry, I'm trying to convert them as much as possible over to build packs, but people are still delivering apps to VMs.
ECS. Okay, so people are. Yeah. So what you're doing is you're using proprietary platform-specific container runtimes that don't have the features of Kubernetes, and you're locked in. It doesn't seem like a better deal to me. I don't get this. We're not going to use Kubernetes. Like Kubernetes is, don't use Kubernetes directly. Just use a layer on top of it. But definitely, you're better off using something, on top of that. I don't know. I feel like that whole ship is kind of sailed,
Yeah. So here's another
Shipping
question.
a VM seems weird.
Where
directly.
Personally, I am running Kubernetes. I've got a handful, actually. I can jump into a little bit of a demo. We're going to talk about scaling to zero. So I'm going to use this talk about Kubernetes to allow us to transition slightly towards this scale to zero. I use a product called Knative Serving.
There you go.
So that I can scale my apps to zero on my laptop, on my dev box, and on the one that I'm streaming with. Knative Serving gives me that capability. And it also, with some of the features that Spring provides, it gives me the ability to have a good experience. So it's not just scale to zero. Hey, because I've also been in that position not too long ago where I had multiple Tomcat servers deployed. And if I wanted to switch from one project to the other, I would go and stop one Tomcat server and I go to a different directory and start up another one that had different configs because I didn't want the conflict. I needed the same ports, or for example, because that's all that I had. So it doesn't feel like it was that long ago where I was making those kinds of decisions. And now Kubernetes gives me really good capabilities, but it's not just Kubernetes. Knative Serving is kind of an easy approach to get to that scale to zero. So on my laptop, on my desktop, let's do this. Let's share the screen. I'm going to try to do it this way. Please all. So like, hey, I ran into some issues, but we'll do it like this. We can all watch. Well, that didn't work.
I really like your backstage room. It's really nice. I appreciate the candies you put in there, the flowers.
I'm trying to wipe my little view there.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. It's there.
Looks good.
So I'm not going to start with that one. I'm going to start with this one because that one was giving me some problems. This idea of scaling to zero. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show. I have lots of Kubernetes clusters that I run, and that's cool. This is the way that I operate. So even on Docker desktop, kubectx. Let's go to my Docker desktop. All right, it's not anything fancy, but I'm running Knative Serving so that I can. And the thing is, you don't see the workloads that have scaled to zero. I get that memory back. It's not being consumed right now. So that's kind of cool. So I wanted to show that first. So what I did before this, and for those that didn't get to see that, I showed that I have a handful of Kubernetes contexts that I'm running for the different clusters in my environment. And then I showed that I'm actually running Knative Serving on Docker desktop on my daily driver. So now before the show, I went and I built a project using the Spring CLI. I added the web and the Spring actuator. And now all I'm doing is a Maven. I'm going to run it. I already did the native compile, I believe. So I'm going to do, no, not that. I'm just going to say target demo. Maybe I didn't do it. Oh, so I got to do it again. So I'm going to do MDN. First, I'm going to check my Java version. Make sure I'm using the right Java version. So I do have Graal VM here. And now I'm going to do my native compile. So I made sure that I had Graal VM. I'm doing a native compilation. This is one of the steps that's going to allow me to do things like scaling to zero. And in this case, we're using Graal VM with the AOT processing capabilities of Spring Boot 3. So it's going to take some time. It's going to, on this machine, I believe it's going to take about 60 seconds. And that's one of the trade-offs. It's one of the reasons you don't want to do this as a part of your inner loop development, right? If I'm making changes, if Josh is doing a demo, he's not rebuilding the native image. He's using the JVM and all the features that the JVM provides, like his dev tools. But on your way to production, you might want to throw this into your pipelines and have it deliver a native image. And if you're doing that, if you're building native images right next to your JVM-based images, then you can do a side-by-side comparison. Like if you're using something like Knative Serving or Kubernetes, you can actually send, hey, I want to send 20% of the traffic to this native image, and I want to send the other 80% of that traffic over to this JVM image. And you can do a side-by-side comparison on which one's going to perform better and then make a decision later on. But you don't have to be pot committed on either one. Validate. And the thing is, sometimes those decisions that we make, the assumptions that we make, sometimes it's a good idea to revisit them. So today, the way that this application is running, it might work better as a JVM image, but tomorrow when I add feature X, it might actually deliver better as a native image. So now that our native image is done, it took 53 seconds. Now I'm going to run it. So I'm going to run target, /target demo. I'm going to run in the background. And I can see that it started up in 0.077 seconds.
Nice. Oh, so satisfying.
So if this was a container and I make a request, that 0.07, it could be scaled to 0. What that number means is it was scaled to 0, and then it's going to come up that fast and be ready to take traffic. So we can
I feel it's also, I wish we could see the memory before and after too. That's always fun to look at.
So I have a little feature here that I can show
memory.
how much this process ID. I do.
Actually, Josh, I'm trying to lose some memory weight. That's what I'm thinking to find here.
Physical. So this process. So the scale to 0 part is one thing. That's one part of the equation. But what you just brought up is that memory footprint. When we're doing native images, the memory footprint is much smaller. So in this case, it was just 35 megabytes for this native image. But this native image is only going to be able to run on Darwin ARM64. Again, one of the trade-offs. But if you're running, you can do this on Linux, you can do this on Windows. If your production environment looks different and native images are an option, it's worth investigating. At the least, take it and go for a spin. So that's one of those cool things. Now I can kill that process. But the other part of that scale to 0 is, that startup time. So I could have a bunch of these. And it might not be the 35 megs. Maybe it's going to be 300 megs or 2 gigs. But if I'm not using it, I get those 2 gigs back.
Saleh, we're trying to work through easy ways to build applications that scale to 0. So suppose you wanted to deploy an application and it's going to be running for some incidental work, but then when it's not being used, you don't want to have it sitting there idle, just taking up memory, even if it's a dwindlingly small amount, as is enabled thanks to GraalVM native images. So that's what we're talking about. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Welcome to the stream.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. So we had a couple of questions here. Thanks, folks. Modulus, Polylist, sound interesting. I'm a DevOps now rolling out Kubernetes in a predominantly Go Python node. Typical big monolith strangulation will propose modulus if DDD becomes hard. Yeah, the concept, the pattern of doing that is a great idea.
When it becomes hard.
Yes.
Yes.
Sean?
Oh, absolutely.
How's your experience with Knative? Do you see any performance impact with FAS versus long range? So I use Knative for everything. And I can say, like, performance-wise, one of those clusters that I showed a second ago was Raspberry Pis. I've got multiple Raspberry Pi clusters running around here. So the ARM64 images that I'm building, I can run on these Raspberry Pi devices, and I love it. So DaShaun.dev is running on Raspberry Pis. So with Knative. So that's fun. I'm a big fan. And I'm also a big fan of Knative eventing and all the things that it provides. Cyclone says, is there any convenient way to create a JDBC data source on test containers, Tomcat, without preparing an image externally?
Wait, what?
He's saying he wants Tomcat as a test container, is what I think he's saying. He wants to be able to define the JDBC data source in that test container. And that is a use case that I've not ran into.
I still don't understand.
So instead of embedded Tomcat, he wants to run a test container Tomcat. So think of how we do like our
wait, like as a web server, like you're deploying to it?
Service, yeah.
Oh, well, I guess you could just expose a volume and then, but that's weird. Why? Who's going to run the test container though? We need Java code to run that. So
here's one pattern that I have seen. And I'm going to just throw it out there. You can throw it back or you can throw it away. The idea where organization, they create their user service and hey, here's our user service. And then they develop a container as a test container to give out to the rest of the world. So as it's different than what we do with like a Spring Cloud contract, where we're instead of sending out the contract, the stubs, we're sending out a container, a test container for their service.
Why a test? Why not just a?
Why not
So
just
when we say test container, are we saying just a container?
It's just a container. Yep. That
Yeah. Okay.
had a stubbed implementation of their user service that they can access.
Neat.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I'm really digging. That authorization server in 3.1.
Yes. Go on.
That's hot sauce. It's hot sauce, I tell you. That's good. Let's do more of that, please. Try it out. Just
yes,
it's great.
Thomas says the problem is if you don't get a platform on top of Kubernetes, because in reality, you often don't get this. And I will take Docker Compose any day over native Kubernetes. As a dev, I don't care on what my app runs. And I'm going to challenge you to say, and we can investigate this together. I want to get rid of all of your Docker Compose because every time that you run Docker Compose, all of those images are all up the whole time. The difference between that and what I'm doing on Knative Serving, you can still have your Docker Compose like setup that's going to deploy all of your instances, all of your backing services, but I can make it so those things scale to 0. So you can have all of your apps running, your Docker Compose, I'm doing it in air quotes. You can have all of those things running, but scale to 0, and you could have Slack open, right, Josh? Slack and my ID.
Slack is a terrible idea, but yes, you could in theory. You feed up in a fram, but don't do that.
So I get it. I get the value of Docker Compose, how easy you can configure. I get it, and
it's good for dev.
Yeah,
but even there,
And now they even have, there's easy ways to convert your Docker Compose into other YAML. It would be good if you guys could put something. Oh, we already did that.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
And he said, thank you. And Alex says this 0.077 startup time looks sexy.
Looks good.
And this isn't the only way. So the native image route is one way. And I had another demo here that I ran into some issues, but I would like to talk about Crack. So the idea here is Azul has created a JVM. Their Azul with Crack. It's version 17. I will pull it up and I'll show as much as I can. Yeah, we'll do that. Well, where did the other one go? See, I don't have my cohort here. Well, maybe I won't show it because that's confusing me. But the idea is you can start up your JVM image, no extra steps. You start up your JVM image, you get it to a point where all your classes are loaded, and then you take a checkpoint. And that checkpoint writes some stuff to disk. And then the next time you run it, you can start from that checkpoint. The coordinated restore from that checkpoint. So your startup time for this Spring Boot application with Crack from Azul, you could actually have a better startup time in some cases than you do with the native image because all of your things are preloaded.
I've seen demos where it's like 5 milliseconds. It's not just a little better. I've seen ridiculous,
So now we have options. Is it time
Well, I think
to pack up and head to the airport?
No, I got a call from Fredericks, Maryland, I think. Some spam. I don't know.
Yeah. Now my phone is. I wonder if it's related.
But I think also if you're pulling in a lot of other, like Spring worked really hard on the native to make sure we, coordinated with other projects to make sure that, when you start a native compilation, it really did handle all the hints to make a lot of those hints to make it simple. But sometimes you are pulling in other things that were not ready at the time. So it adds complexity if you have to add a lot of these hints. When you're doing Crack, it really does simplify it because you don't have to do that. You're just doing a regular compilation, a run, a checkpoint. So there is that difference of complexity when you're doing your project building. That's another advantage that you do get from like a Crack. Yeah. And the thing is it really does when, in the jug, when people say, which one should we use? It's like, well, you really do have to know what test cases you're going for and if it's startup time versus memory, then yeah, crack is great. I'm gonna stop there. Sebastian did something for Spring IO that really, it was like that
Great
chart.
video.
So look up Spring IO, Sebastian Deleuze. Look that chart up. It's awesome on saying what is your basic decision matrix on when you should use crack or native or just stay with a regular JVM. So
that's a true it depends moment, is which one gets me there faster and which one is faster.
And Jose Schaefer introduced me to the 7-layer dip. It depends. That's great.
Does it have guac in it though?
So there's options. And the thing, my default setting is it's so easy with Spring and Spring Boot to validate these things. If you've got a test framework that's going to go and run, your million transactions per minute, like go run it against a native image, run it against an image with crack. If that startup time matters, then hey, crack's a great option. If the performance of the JVM matters, then maybe, because now there's kind of another vector that we have to deal with, is like the dollar sign, right? Like how much money is it going to cost to run 3 instances with the larger memory footprint using crack for that good startup time versus the 4 images that I might take to get the same performance throughput running on the native image. Like there's these checks and balances, these
absolutely
different things we have to investigate, and we have to do that more often now, right?
I like that you just started this conversation with dollar signs and then mentioned the word checks, and somehow it
all made sense.
It really is it's a checks and balances, and it does make sense. Yeah. Nerds.
Yes. Face purple wide eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Praful Kumar Sony, I hope I'm saying that right. Is there a recommended guide for Pack CLI to build Spring Boot Docker images specifying a jar path? Couldn't use Spring Boot build image task since we have some image customization requirements. I will definitely point you to
buildpacks.io.
Buildpacks.io first. And
or
then
Paketo.io.
Yep, Paketo.io. There's definitely guides, and look at their examples, and go to the Java build pack. Go to the Java build pack, configure the docs on Paketo.io, and that'll give you all of the things that you need. So definitely. And if you've got more questions, you reach out. I know a thing or two about build packs. I'd be happy to help you get to where you need to go.
You know what, it just occurred to me? Lots of countries they have cashier's checks, but most countries don't have like personal checks anymore. It's just America. It's basically useless in most of the rest of the world. Yeah.
Do you have checks? You have checks?
I mean, most countries don't have it, right? Like, not personal checks, right? I don't have personal checks either because I haven't used paper money for decades. But but still, like, it's just a very have you ever tried to give somebody a personal check in some other country?
I don't know.
They have no idea.
One out anymore.
They'll just.
It has been a long time.
I actually do have a book of checks, and it's got dust on it, hidden away in the house, and it's like
emergencies.
I mean, it's
emergency.
It's like that one service tech that comes by and says, "Well, we're going to charge you 3 or 4%. Use the credit card." Okay, now how do I fill out a check? Let me think about this. Amount.
So this is great.
I don't. So much work. Just
tap. Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is not every place in America has the tap. I kind of got spoiled. And everything's just like, no, just tap here. No, my card doesn't work. Yeah, they just tap. No, it doesn't. Just tap.
It doesn't tap. It's not just a platform. It's a way of commerce,
Yes.
Just tap. That's
it is.
My life for money and Kubernetes.
Every time I go buy something, I think tap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and so I've got this watch. This watch is like, it's almost dangerous how easy it is to buy things now. Like, wrist. Oh, I bought something. Oh well.
Taking it home.
I needed that guard gnome anyway.
Yes.
Don't even have.
Put it outside my apartment right there.
Oh yeah, look at this. See.
Yep. Oh, I got it. Norway got rid of checks at least 35 years ago, but when I lived in Canada from 2006 2009, they used checks. Oh, see, that must have been something.
Wow.
That must have been something. Yeah. So this is great. This is great. Josh, you can take your call. We are running up towards the end of the hour. Get your questions asked. If you didn't get them, what I like to say is, at my house, if you come over for dinner and you leave hungry, that's your fault. If you come to office hours and you have questions and you leave without asking your question, that's your fault. So get your questions asked. We have the experts here waiting for your.
I've got questions.
You have some questions?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Ask questions.
How you doing, my friends? How are you? Like, what's going on? I just realized we didn't do the whole formality thing. We just kind of dove right into it.
We did.
But
We just jumped right in. It's office hours. We're just hanging out, and then we have the hangout stuff. That's what happens. I'm doing great, and I'm better now. I liked your metaphor about writing a letter and having a new piece of paper for each. I like that, and it's stuck.
Thanks, man. I've been doing this whole thing. I haven't had a cup of coffee yet, and so for me personally, in my life, I'm gonna have a cup of coffee here soon, and it just makes me feel better.
Sun rose. Like we watched the sunrise behind you.
Yeah.
I thought it was great.
We got to share a sunrise together, Josh.
Well, wasn't our first one. Don't lie. We watched Sun Microsystems rise and fall. Like
we saw that one. Solitary Turian. I will give you a demonstration on how I scale to 0. I'll do that offline though. So look for a video coming out.
Cool.
Did I do it today? Yeah, maybe later today. Look for a video on that. And Alexander says, I have a question about Spring Tomcat WebSocket client and random disconnections. We are getting reason unexpected status of SSL engine result after an unwrap operation and code. Oof. I can say that I have not seen that. Have you seen that?
No, stack. I'd have to. It's like a classic stack trace. Got to look it up.
Yeah, let's get that documented somewhere. Maybe a GitHub repo or a Stack Overflow, and then shoot me a link and I'll take a look personally. But thanks for the question. It'd be nice. I wish I could say, oh yeah, I've seen that, but I haven't. So happy to work with you on that offline. Great. Any other questions? Get them answered or get them asked and answered, hopefully. And I'll just say again, thanks.
Well, the shirt of the day.
What's the shirt of the day look like?
Shirt of the day. Let me see if I can stand up so that you'll see it. There we go. So we see this. Well, it's a little blurry. We see the sun, the earth, and the moon, and then the moon is crying, and it says, "Let me go here."
I'm sure it's just a phase.
It's just a phase. So there we go. A little bit of an astronomical kind of thing there. Humor.
Yes.
It's blurred, but I loved it.
Yes, totally worth it.
Yeah, I've got the background blurred just because I want to be mysterious.
That's good. I wish I should wear my background because I want to come off as clean and professional. But.
I gave up on that years ago, and it's made my life very good.
Excellent.
So what you buying for breakfast?
So they have here in Australia,
coffee.
they pride themselves on their coffee house culture. You know, they have lots of like legit coffee options here, whereas in other places we just eat mud or something. I don't know what they think the rest of us do, but they keep on reminding me of how good the coffee is here, and I'm like, oh, thanks a lot. It's not like I've never been to a coffee house before, but straws. Look, I'm an iced coffee guy.
Yeah.
It depends some people, but I don't care. Hey, I just saw the word SSL result, and it reminds me of one of my new favorite features. The SSL bundle.
Let's go.
Support in Spring Boot 3.1. Has somebody else played with that?
Oh, yes.
So explain what this is doing.
So imagine you're trying to use MongoDB. Don't do that, but you could do that. I don't care. Imagine you're using MongoDB.
It's easy.
And you want to make an SSL connection, right? So it's very easy to build your application that does something. Melbourne. Good to know. So imagine you're trying to use MongoDB, or you're just trying to use Postgres or whatever. We build our applications, we test it, we cycle through. It's all well and good. Then it's time to go to production. Okay, well, now your connections need to be SSL. Oh, okay. And that'll usually trip people up. So a lot of us spend a lot of time setting up the keys and lining up the stars so that they all line up, correctly, and they're secure and all that. And that's just one thing. And imagine you're trying to also secure your HTTPS application, or whatever else, or trying to make a SSL web client request or REST template request, whatever. And Spring Boot has had this proliferation of different properties that you can use to specify certificates and keys, and sometimes they disagree. There are different values for different things, and it's just never been very consistent. So now in Spring Boot 3.1, there's this new unified thing called the SSL bundle. You can specify what we call trust material, which is keys and certificates and what all, in one place, and then reference that in all these other places. So anywhere else in the Spring Boot ecosystem that takes or that can be configured to do SSL, we have this normalized abstraction you can use to specify it in one place. So now you can use the same certificates everywhere, which is good.
Yes.
Super convenient. And that means if you want to update it, you just need to update that one object. And of course, you can do that with properties. So,
So good. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much
Oh,
for joining.
I see life fill Josh right now. I see happiness, or not happiness. That's not happiness.
That's
Australian.
I needed it. Whatever.
Well, thank you so much for joining. Thanks everybody for joining, and for those that are listening online later, thanks. And
thank you for joining.
Thanks a bunch.
Yeah, this was fun. I learned a thing or two, and it was good to see you all. You're better than coffee. I started with you all, and knowing that this experience is about to wrap up, I made sure I had some coffee to make the medicine go down. Bye, my friends.
Thanks a bunch.
Take care, folks.